videos aren't super great yet. Still figuring out this whole YouTube thing and where to place my phone because I don't have a stand yet for it and things like that. So bear with me. The content is there, even if the videos aren't super great, unless they're blues training videos and stuff like that, because those I can do in one take with no problems, or limited problems. So bear with me with this. Sorry, it keeps zooming in and out of focus here. Let's throw it back up here. This seems to be working better. Yeah, so I'm in my nerd room, also my computer room. Today's topic is going to be about positive reinforcement dog training versus old school training methods, or old school trainers, and how to spot a positive reinforcement trainer when looking for a trainer either at a store or at a home trainer that will come to your house, which is what I do now. And did before, but so I've done both, not both old school and positive, but I've always been a positive reinforcement trainer myself. I have apprenticed under some old school trainers because you can learn a lot from them, but it's definitely not my personal style of training. And not all of them will be bad either, but it kind of depends on what you're looking for your dog. And once again, these are just my opinions. So big disclaimer here. If you don't agree with anything I have to say, that is fine. Scroll on. Animals and having pets is just like having kids. Everybody's going to have their own opinion about what's the right thing to do versus what's the wrong thing to do and things like that. These are just my personal opinions. And what I've experienced in my time of working with dogs, what works and what doesn't. I've worked with a lot of dogs, like I said in my intro video, and I've worked with a lot of rescues and a lot of rescue dogs. I've even fostered dogs before that had like resource guarding issues or were very high energy or scarfing behaviors and things like that. And we'll get into scarfing and feeding and nutrition stuff in another video. But this video is going to be about positive reinforcement training versus old school training. So old school training is using a lot of those more forceful techniques to get your dog to do things. So choke chains and prong collars, pushing and shoving on those back hips to force them into a sit, or grabbing and dragging front paws into downs, and pushing on the shoulder blades to keep them there. Those were old school training techniques. You definitely don't want to be shoving on your dog's body to get them into a position. If you have to do that, then you're not doing something right. Because the first thing to go on 90% of the breeds out there is hip dysplasia and arthritis of the back hips. All right. That's how I lost my last guy, but he didn't end up having to cross the Rainbow Bridge until he was 15, thank goodness. But all three of his breeds were predisposed, because he was a big Michigan mutt, as I like to call him, a Heinz 57, you know. But all three of the breeds that he was most prominent in him were prone to hip dysplasia and arthritis of the back hips. He was rough-coated collie mixed with golden retriever and yellow lab. All three of those breeds, and especially large breeds like our Great Danes, our Wolfhounds, our German Shepherds especially, because those back ends are just getting more and more swooped lower and lower to the ground. That's why a lot of people are going towards like the Dutch or the Czech or the Shiloh Shepherds, especially like border control and working dogs and things like that, are now starting to go towards the other shepherding families, because the German Shepherd line is just, the back ends are getting so bad. Now that's not always the case. I've met some that last a very long time, and thank goodness for that. But sometimes it can be predisposed, or it can be overbreeding that causes these problems to come on sooner than they should. And that has been the case with even some young dogs that I've worked with. You know, I have seen 6-month-old golden retrievers that had hips that looked worse than my 15-year-old mix, and the reason was purely overbreeding issues. there was nothing to do with bad training in that regard. But I have seen dogs in rescue where the hips are touch sensitive and things like that because of poor training techniques used on them at young ages. Um, so it is a very touch and go subject, but I, for one, would prefer to help get my dog into a position using a food lure, a training treat at the nose, or a toy, or a bone or a chew, than pushing and shoving on his back hips. I'll never do that. And when you grab and drag on those front paws, that's an old school technique as well. And then you push on the shoulder blades to force them into that down position. That sticks with dogs mentally. One of the first fosters I ever had, I remember I was trying to teach her paw because it's one of the last tricks I usually teach a young dog. They have to get the good behaviors under their belt first because it's the first cute thing we teach our dogs. So then they're super excited. And every time you get them to sit, they want to give you the paw. So, oh, hi, Blue. Blue just walked in to visit. But yeah, so with her, I was teaching her paw, and you lightly scoop that paw just to associate the word with that part of their body. And as soon as I lightly scooped that paw off the ground, she flopped so hard into a down. I could hear her hit the pavement because she remembered being grabbed and dragged by somebody previously into that down position. So you can see the mental and emotional repercussions that these behaviors can have on dogs, or these old techniques can have on dogs. And it's very sad. Now on to choke chains and prong collars. Yeah, a lot of like training styles still require them. And they do have a time and place. You know, I've met some trainers that help with military dogs, or police force dogs and stuff like that. They're tools that are meant to be used in certain situations, but I don't necessarily believe that they really belong in the everyday family's household. I have seen, 100-pound Rotties pull on a prong collar, or as also known as a pinch collar, like it's nothing because it doesn't affect them. And also a lot of pet parents don't position them properly. They don't know how to use them properly. When you use a choke chain or a prong collar, it's not meant to choke at the throat like this. It's actually meant to sit under the jawbone, and then that back line, that back loop is supposed to pull up and sit behind the ears. And what that's supposed to do is control that head and keep it moving forward so it doesn't pull. A lot of pet parents who use these and don't have an understanding of them, they slide down to the throat, and then they're choking here or pinching here, which isn't going to stop anything, but what it's going to end up doing is collapsing that trachea or that esophagus. And that's a big, big no-no. And that can do some major harm on our dogs. Breeds that are especially prone to pulling, it's instinctual. It's not going to work very well on them. Your pit bulls or your staffies, they were meant to pull, the Victorian Riches baby carriages. That's why they're known as nanny dogs. So that's why they're so broad in the chest and so muscular in the chest, is so they can pull. And so since they have an instinct to pull, I wouldn't walk them on a collar. I'd put them on a front clip easy walk harness. I really do like those for my heavy pulling breeds. It keeps everything off of the throat and around the chest instead, and it works with the dog's natural instincts to pull because you're now controlling that front pivot point with your lead.